On a cold December night in 1965, a fireball streaked across the sky, landing in the quiet town of Kecksburg. Witnesses spoke of an acorn-shaped object, bronze and etched with mysterious symbols, whisked away by the military before anyone could truly understand. Tonight, we drift into that memory, tracing hums in the forest, spirals on frost, and the gentle rhythm of a mystery that has lingered for decades. Close your eyes and let the extraordinary unfold, softly, slowly, and endlessly. Chapter 1. The Sky Unfolds. The evening had settled over Kecksburg like a soft blanket, the kind that makes everything feel still, familiar, and almost timeless. The sun had begun to dip behind distant hills, painting the winter sky in pale streaks of pink and gold. Children's laughter drifted faintly from backyards, mixing with the gentle creak of wind through bare branches, and the smell of wood smoke from chimneys hung in the cold air. It was the sort of December evening when time seems to pause, and even the ordinary becomes a little bit magical. Yet, that calm was about to ripple. Somewhere far beyond the horizon, a bright glimmer appeared, delicate at first, like a pinprick of curiosity in the sky. Then it grew, stretching into a streak of light that seemed to shimmer in green and blue, moving in ways that no one had expected. It darted and arced, sometimes slowing as though it were curious itself, and at other moments, it blazed across the heavens with the brilliance of a lantern swung by invisible hands. People across 6 states and parts of Ontario, Canada, stopped whatever they were doing to watch. They pointed, whispered to one another, and held their breath, as if the world itself had paused to witness this streak of fire. In Kecksburg, the light carved a path across the fading sky that no one could ignore. Farmers paused mid-step in the fields, hands brushing against coarse hay, heads tilted toward the horizon. Children outside, tossing snow or chasing each other, froze as the streak caught their eyes, reflecting off icy patches of ground. Windows in small houses glimmered as the light passed, and for a heartbeat, everything ordinary seemed to vanish. People did not yet know what they were seeing, but they felt a gentle pull of curiosity, a quiet invitation to wonder. And then, it happened. A sound, low and resonant, like a distant drum vibrating beneath the earth, rolled across the town. Doors rattled in their frames, and the dogs barked, uneasy, at a world that had shifted just enough to feel unfamiliar. The air seemed to tingle, as if tiny sparks were dancing invisibly around each person who had stepped outside. Those first moments after the thump were a mixture of disbelief and awe. Was it an airplane? A meteor? Something else entirely? The mind raced for explanations, but explanations felt too small for what they were seeing. Some of the townspeople ran toward the distant woods off Meteor Road, where the lights seemed to vanish behind dense trees. Their boots crunched over frozen leaves, and breath fogged in the chilly air as they hurried, drawn by something larger than themselves. Among them was Bill Bullabush, a volunteer firefighter, who often spent evenings walking the quiet paths near his home. That night, he moved with steady purpose, his heart thumping in rhythm with the echoing sound still lingering in the hills. When he reached the edge of the ravine, the sight that greeted him was unlike anything he had ever seen. Nestled in the shallow depression of the earth was an object that seemed to belong to another world. It was acorn-shaped, smooth and metallic, gleaming even in the dim light of the early evening. Its surface reflected the colors of the sunset, but with an unusual shimmer that made it seem alive. No doors, no windows, no seams interrupted its bronze-hued form. Around its base, intricate raised symbols curled and spiraled, like ancient writing whispered across time, waiting to be deciphered. Bill leaned closer, drawn in by both caution and curiosity, and could sense the hum of energy in the air, not loud, not frightening, but subtle, almost like a heartbeat. The smell was faint, attempts of ozone mixed with something earthy, grounding him in the moment. Blue smoke lifted gently from the base of the object, curling in slow, lazy spirals toward the sky. It dissipated as quickly as it appeared, leaving behind the lingering sense that the world had shifted slightly, quietly, in a way that only a few would ever fully grasp. Bill reached out, hesitated, and drew his hand back, unsure if touching the unknown was wise. Yet even from a distance, the object radiated a presence, a calm certainty that it belonged to neither the earth nor the heavens alone. Word spread quickly, carried by phone calls, shouts across yards, and the crackling of local radios. Soon, More neighbors arrived, guided by light or curiosity, forming a small circle around the object. Some whispered in awe, pointing to its unusual markings. Others simply stood, letting their eyes drink in the metallic glow and the gentle curl of smoke. A child's hand brushed an adult's sleeve, and together they marveled at the impossible beauty of something so strange, yet so serene. Among the crowd, John Murphy, a radio reporter from nearby Greensburg, arrived with a microphone in hand. His presence added a sense of quiet legitimacy to the scene. He moved among the witnesses, asking soft questions, letting them describe what they had seen. It was moving in the sky, one farmer said, his voice low. Then it landed, like it had chosen this place on purpose. A child, cheeks pink from the cold, pointed to the object, eyes wide, and whispered, "It looks like a giant acorn from a dream." Murphy listened carefully, nodding, scribbling notes, capturing the texture of human reaction. Fear that wasn't quite fear, the wonder that bloomed slowly in the chest like a warm glow. Even as the crowd grew, a quiet tension settled over the woods. The sound of boots crunching, voices murmuring, and the faint hum of energy from the object mingled with the natural sounds of the evening. Trees swayed gently, their branches reaching toward the sky, and the fading sunlight cast long shadows across the ravine, making the scene feel both intimate and infinite at once. Time seemed suspended. Every heartbeat stretched, every breath lingered, as if the world itself wanted to take its own quiet measure of this strange visitor. By late evening, the first of the authorities arrived. State police and members of the Kecksburg Volunteer Fire Department moved with calm efficiency, not rushing, not panicking. Their presence was orderly, methodical, as if they understood that the unfolding moment demanded careful attention. They began to assess the area, ensuring the safety of the witnesses. But the object itself remained untouched, enigmatic, and silent. Even their trained eyes could not fully decode what had landed in their midst. Then, as if drawn by some invisible command, military personnel began arriving, men in uniform and others in plain clothes. Searchlights pierced the darkness, ropes were strung to control movement, and vehicles formed a careful perimeter. Witnesses watched quietly, noting each motion, each shadow, each shift in light. Among them, Ronnie Struble. Then 21 remembered the odd mix of fear and fascination that hung in the air. Soldiers moved swiftly yet deliberately, cordoning off areas, speaking in soft tones, their faces unreadable. The hum of the acorn-shaped object seemed almost to respond, a gentle echo of intent that was impossible to name. Hours later, a flatbed truck, draped in a tarp, slowly moved from the scene, flanked by jeeps with armed escorts. Its wheels crunched over frozen dirt, leaving tracks that would later fade in the snow. Residents watched in silence, a mixture of awe, sorrow, and quiet understanding threading through them. Some whispered theories, others simply exhaled, as if letting go of the impossible moment would somehow make it more real. And when the convoy disappeared into the distance, the ravine returned to stillness. Blue smoke, lingering in thin wisps, was the only reminder that the world had tilted ever so slightly, and that Kecksburg had been touched by something beyond the ordinary. For those who remained that night, the memories settled like a gentle pulse. They had shone. They had touched the edge of a mystery, and they had been witnesses to something that did not fit neatly into charts, textbooks, or simple explanations. The quiet of the woods returned, but it carried with it a new awareness, that the universe could speak in flashes of green and blue, in arcs of light across a winter sky, and in objects that land silently among the trees. And in that awareness, a seed of curiosity was planted, a soft, insistent question that would take years, decades even, to understand what had truly fallen from the sky that evening. It was a night to remember, not for fear, not for shock, but for the subtle thrill of discovery, the gentle pull of wonder, and the quiet knowledge that some things, no matter how ordinary life may seem, can forever change the way we look at the sky above. A hush settled over Kecksburg, and the first stars began to blink awake, as though the night itself wanted to keep watch over a secret just for those who had seen. And so, the townspeople would carry that night with them, each in their own way, as whispers of the sky settled into memory. Chapter 2: Whispered Stories and First Witnesses. The night after the strange light streaked across the sky, Kecksburg remained quiet, though the air itself seemed charged with a gentle, lingering curiosity. Snow glimmered under the stars, icy crystals catching faint moonlight, each one reflecting the memory of what had fallen from above. Children huddled under blankets, imagining the glowing streak and the acorn-shaped object that now rested in the woods, while adults lingered by their windows, coffee in and replaying the scene in their minds. Everyone felt it, though they could not name it. A small shift in the rhythm of the familiar. A subtle change in the pulse of the world. The morning brought soft whispers of the previous evening's marvel. Families spoke in quiet tones over breakfast tables. "Did you see it?" someone asked, voice hushed, almost reverent, eyes widened, hands clasped, and memories poured forth accounts of sparks, arcs of green and blue, and the curious hum that seemed to linger in the air even after the light had vanished. Parents gently guided their children to recount what they had seen, listening without correction, letting each small detail breathe in its own rhythm. A school-age girl described it as a giant acorn glowing in the trees, and for a moment, adults found themselves nodding because it matched their own impressions. In the fields beyond the town, farmers retraced their steps, pointing to small scorches where sparks had kissed the earth. Horses shuffled nervously in their stables, snorting at the faint echo of memory, as if animals, too, had sensed the unusual visitor. People who had been outside when the light fell spoke of the strange stillness that had followed, a soft hush that was not silence but anticipation, as if the earth itself had been holding its breath. Bill Buellbush, the volunteer firefighter who had first approached the object, became a quiet focal point for these whispers. He moved among neighbors with careful calm, describing what he had seen in soft, measured words. He spoke of the acorn-shaped object, its bronze surface shimmering with subtle light, the intricate symbols encircling its base, and the faint curl of blue smoke that seemed to rise like a gentle exhalation. People leaned closer, captivated, listening not only to his words, but to the rhythm in which he spoke, the way his eyes traced patterns in the memory as though he could see them still. John Murphy, the radio reporter, arrived at the scene in the early morning, carrying a small tape recorder and a notebook. He moved slowly, giving each witness space, listening to their recollections. It hovered, one farmer said, his hands moving to illustrate, and then it touched down like it was choosing its place, like the earth had called it here. A child added, it wasn't scary. It was curious, like it wanted to be seen. Murphy scribbled notes, recording not only facts, but the subtle emotions, the way voices rose and fell, the pauses where words failed to capture the delicate strangeness of the event. By mid-morning, the gathering had grown. Neighbors from further out, drawn by rumors of the quiet pool of fascination, approached the woods. Their footsteps were cautious, respectful, almost ceremonial, as if they were stepping into a sacred space where ordinary rules no longer applied. The acorn-shaped object, now resting quietly under the skeletal branches, seemed to observe them as much as they observed it. It remained unmoving, yet its presence carried a soft resonance, a gentle insistence that it belonged to neither earth nor sky alone. Children played at the edges, their curiosity unchecked, eyes bright, imaginations alive with unspoken stories. Some climbed small hills to get a better view. Some hid behind trees, peeking through fingers. They whispered to each other, voices soft and urgent. "Do you think it's from space?" One asked it. Another replied, "Maybe it's from a dream." Even their questions held no fear, only wonder, and the gentle rhythm of innocent inquiry echoed the thoughts of the adults nearby. As the morning wore on, the first of the official responders arrived. State police officers moved quietly among the crowd, nodding politely, asking gentle questions, but allowing the witnesses to linger. Firefighters joined, ensuring the area remained safe. Their approach was not intrusive, but calm, measured, as though they, too, felt the delicate gravity of the moment. Witnesses described feeling a subtle shift in tension, a quiet knowledge that something unusual had happened, and that their observations mattered. Even if the world beyond Kecksburg might never fully understand, the witnesses themselves became the story's living record. Lillian Hayes, a young girl of 10, spoke of the way the light had glinted off the frost-covered branches, casting tiny reflections like stars scattered across the woods. Her father, nodding in agreement, added details of sparks falling from the streak and small areas of scorched grass. Farmers described the soft vibrations beneath their feet, the hum that seemed to hang in the air like a persistent question. And Bill, standing with quiet dignity, shared the peculiar smell of ozone, the subtle warmth in the air, despite the cold, and the odd sense that the object had arrived intentionally, deliberately, as if seeking witnesses. Murphy's recordings captured these moments, layering voices over the delicate sounds of the woods. A crow calling in the distance, the rustle of leaves under cautious feet, the faint curling of smoke as it drifted lazily skyward. Each voice added texture, each recollection a brushstroke. In a collective memory that seemed almost sacred, people spoke with care, as if raising the words gently into the world so that they would not be lost. And the town listened to itself, felt itself, in a new way, aware that something remarkable had touched their ordinary lives and had left a subtle, luminous imprint. By noon, the gentle hum of human curiosity had attracted more attention. Reporters from nearby towns arrived, quietly interviewing witnesses, their recorders capturing each description and pause, each small shiver of wonder. Conversations wove together. Descriptions of the object's acorn shape, its smooth metallic surface, the raised symbols, the curl of blue smoke, and the faint, almost imperceptible vibration that seemed to pulse in the air. People compared notes, laughed softly at the impossibility of explaining it fully, and marveled at the quiet consistency in their memories. Even across different vantage points, the descriptions harmonized, creating a delicate, shared understanding of what had occurred. The air carried a subtle tension, not sharp or frightening, but anticipatory, as if the world itself was holding a secret. Children wandered closer to the object under careful watch, pointing and whispering to one another, while adults observed from just beyond reach, respecting the quiet gravity of the scene. Time stretched, measured in heartbeats and the slow drift of smoke, as everyone savored the beauty of the impossible moment. By late afternoon, the first rumors of military presence began to circulate. People whispered about men in plain clothes, arriving in quiet vehicles alongside roads, moving with calm purpose. Their approach was deliberate but unhurried, a quiet contrast to the chaotic excitement of the morning. Witnesses observed without confrontation, aware that the mystery had layers yet unseen. Even as authority began to gather, the object retained its serene presence, a gentle sentinel in the woods, observing in quiet, leaving the town's collective heart fluttering with curiosity and awe. As the day waned, families began to return to their homes, but the memory of the morning lingered like the final notes of a song. Children imagined stories of glowing visitors from the stars. Adults held a quiet awareness that something extraordinary had brushed their world, leaving behind subtle, resonant questions. Even in their ordinary routines, stirring coffee, tending fires, shuffling through papers, the sensation remained. A gentle, persistent tug at the imagination. A soft insistence that not everything could be explained, that the universe could still surprise, and that the ordinary might always be touched by the extraordinary. That night, Kecksburg slept under a sky still shimmering with stars. The echoes of curiosity and gentle tension floated through the quiet streets and darkened woods, weaving into the dreams of children and adults alike. Every flicker of wind, every distant rustle in the trees, seemed a reminder of the night when the heavens had spoken softly, leaving behind a story to be whispered across generations. And in the hearts of those who had witnessed the morning, a quiet question remained, pulsing softly, like the blue smoke that had curled into the sky. What had truly come down to touch our world, and what would it teach us if we dared to look closely enough? The mystery had only begun, and the gentle hum of questions would ripple through Kecksburg for years to come. Chapter 3. The quiet arrival of authority as the sun dipped lower, painting the horizon with pale shades of orange and lavender. A subtle change settled over Kecksburg. The townspeople had spent the morning and early afternoon speaking in hushed tones about the acorn-shaped object, sharing memories that had not yet lost their luminous edges. Children had wandered through the edges of the woods, eyes wide with gentle fascination, while adults traced the impressions left in the frozen ground, feeling the faint echo of a thump that still resonated through their feet. The town existed in a quiet balance of awe and curiosity, suspended in that delicate moment when ordinary life brushed against the extraordinary. Then, a shift arrived, almost imperceptible at first. Along the outskirts of the woods, figures began to appear, moving with careful rhythm. They were dressed in uniforms that spoke of authority, but carried themselves with quiet discretion. Their vehicles rolled slowly along the frost-covered paths, their lights cutting soft arcs through the trees without disturbing the hushed ambiance of the gathering. The people of Kecksburg watched, instinctively respectful, sensing that this new presence was not here to frighten but to observe, to manage, to claim responsibility for something beyond ordinary understanding. The first whisper circulated quickly among the witnesses. "Look," someone murmured, pointing to the approaching figures. "They're from the military." Another added, "It must be for the object." The word object itself carried weight, a solemn acknowledgement that this was no longer merely a spectacle, but something tangible, something that had descended from the heavens and now commanded attention beyond the town's boundaries. Children paused in their play, leaning against parents, peering between trees as the vehicles moved into position with calm precision. Bill Buellbush, still standing near the object, felt a subtle tension ripple through the crowd. He had seen fire, smoke, and strange lights before. But this was different. The military presence was deliberate, methodical, and quiet. Everything in its arrival suggested that the world beyond Kecksburg had taken notice of what had happened. Officers moved in small, precise groups, ropes in hand, guiding one another without rush. Their movements were like a soft dance of control, measured and deliberate, ensuring that the object remained untouched while the observers remained at a safe distance. John Murphy, the local reporter, captured every detail. His recorder hummed softly as he moved among the witnesses, asking gentle questions and noting the pattern of authority unfolding before him. "They're organized," one farmer said, gesturing toward the personnel. "Careful, like they've done this before." The phrase carried a subtle chill of realization. Whatever had fallen from the sky was now in the hands of those trained to respond, and it would not be left to the town to decipher its mysteries. As the afternoon deepened into early evening, the first signs of the object being moved became visible. A flatbed truck arrived, its bed covered in heavy tarpaulin, its wheels crunching softly over frost and leaves. Witnesses drew back, sensing the gravity of the moment. The air seemed to pulse with anticipation, the blue smoke from the object curling lazily as if reluctant to leave, whispering a farewell in spirals that caught the last light of the day. Children pressed closer to parents, holding hands, sensing that this was a story they would carry in their hearts forever. Armed personnel guided the removal carefully. Jeeps flanked the flatbed, mobbing slowly, ensuring that the delicate balance between curiosity and authority was maintained. No sudden movements, no loud commands, only soft instructions, whispered murmurs, and the quiet hum of the engines. The witnesses watched with a mix of awe and a subtle unease, aware that the town had become a small stage for an event that stretched far beyond their understanding. The town itself seemed to pause. Windows remained open, just a crack, allowing the crisp winter air to carry the faint hum of activity from the woods. Doors were left ajar, though no one entered or left unnecessarily. Even the wind moved differently that evening, curling softly through the skeletal branches, carrying the scent of smoke and something faintly metallic, the residue of the object's presence. It was as though Kecksburg itself had leaned forward to watch, holding its breath along with the human witnesses. For many, the event was surreal, yet quietly grounding. Children whispered theories to one another. "Maybe it's from another world," said one. "Maybe it's a secret from the sky," replied another. Their words were careful, spoken in half giggles and half reverent, acknowledging the strangeness of what they saw, while letting the mystery breathe in the spaces between their sentences. Adults, too, found themselves speculating, though with softer restraint. They traced patterns in the trees where the object had rested, compared impressions of its shape, and spoke of the hum in the air, and the curling blue smoke as if it were part of a quiet language only the earth and sky understood. Bill moved alongside the officers without interfering, offering small observations in measured tones. He noted how the object seemed heavier than it looked, how the symbols traced gentle patterns around its base, and how the hum seemed to linger even as it was lifted from the ground. There was a calm reverence in his movements, a patience that mirrored the rhythm of the authorities, and in that quiet observation, he felt a sense of responsibility. The story would live in their memories, preserved gently, to be shared in whispers and careful recollections for years to come. John Murphy continued his recording, capturing voices, impressions, and the subtle, almost musical sounds of human movement around the object. People described their emotions not in grand declarations, but in small gestures. A hand over the mouth, a slow exhale, a soft nod of agreement between neighbors. The energy was calm, yet charged with curiosity. A perfect tension that allowed everyone present to experience the extraordinary without fear, to absorb it gently into memory as one absorbs a quiet, radiant dream. As twilight settled fully over the town, the flatbed truck began its slow journey away from the woods. The object, now fully covered, was escorted with the same deliberate care, disappearing down the winding roads toward destinations unknown. Witnesses noted the absence of urgency, no sirens, no shouting, only the soft crunch of tires and the muted hum of engines. And yet, despite the calm, there was a subtle shift in the town's consciousness. The ordinary had been touched, transformed by a visitor that moved between worlds. And for a moment, everyone understood that the universe held secrets beyond imagination, waiting quietly for gentle eyes and patient hearts. Even after the truck had disappeared from view, people lingered. The blue smoke had faded, leaving only faint traces in the cold air, the symbols etched in memory rather than on the earth. Conversations were soft, speculative, and reverent. Children compared impressions, adults shared silent reflections, and in the distance, the skeletal trees stood like sentinels over a site that had briefly hosted something extraordinary. That night, Kecksburg's streets returned to their usual calm, but the energy of the day persisted. Windows glimmered with candlelight, fires burned in hearths, and the town exhaled slowly, carrying with it a shared memory that would ripple outward across generations. Parents told children to sleep, but the night felt alive, infused with subtle hums and whispers of wonder, a quiet promise that the world might still contain mysteries too delicate for words, and yet vivid enough to touch every heart that bore witness. In quiet bedrooms, under soft blankets, children imagined the acorn-shaped visitor, hovering gently in the trees, symbols glinting under the moonlight, blue smoke curling like a secret message to the earth. Adults replayed their day with careful attention, noticing the harmony of movement, the deliberate calm of authority, and the almost tender precision with which the extraordinary had been handled. The hum of possibility lingered in every room, every corner, every quiet street, as though the town itself had become a keeper of gentle secrets. And in that stillness, the people of Kecksburg understood something profound, though it was unspoken. The sky had opened briefly to let them glimpse the unknown. It had whispered, not shouted. It had descended with quiet reverence, left a trace, and returned to its vastness. The memory would settle softly into their hearts, a slow burning ember of awe, curiosity, and the gentle recognition that even ordinary lives could touch the extraordinary, when one simply paused to look and listen. Then night deepened, stars appearing one by one, their cold light delicate and distant. And though the acorn-shaped object had gone, its presence lingered, folded into the frost, the smoke, the hum, and the minds of everyone who had seen it. The town slept under the same sky, yet nothing would feel quite the same again. And as Kecksburg dreamed under the starry sky, whispers of the object curled through the town like smoke, hinting at stories yet to be uncovered. Chapter 4. Echoes of wonder. The morning after the object's removal arrived with a soft, lingering chill. Frost clung to the fields and to the edges of sidewalks, sparkling under pale sunlight, while the skeletal branches of trees stretched toward the sky like delicate ink sketches. Kecksburg awoke slowly, in quiet rhythm, each household moving through familiar routines. Yet beneath the ordinary motions lay an invisible pulse, a subtle hum of shared wonder that threaded through the town. It was a rhythm felt in gentle smiles, lingering glances, and whispered conversations that floated across breakfast tables like delicate wisps of smoke. People remembered the night before in fragments and vivid flashes. Children spoke first, their words carrying the bright clarity of imagination, untempered by doubt. Lillian Hayes, eyes wide and earnest, described the acorn-shaped visitor with care, tracing the shape in the air with her small fingers. "It wasn't scary," she said softly. "It looked curious, like it wanted us to see it." Her mother nodded silently, watching her daughter's gestures, and felt that same quiet pulse of curiosity that had woven through every heart the night before. Even now, long after the hum had faded and the blue smoke had dissolved into the air, the memory lingered, tangible as the frost underfoot. Adults, too, reflected in subtler ways. Farmers who had walked the fields in the early hours traced the scorch marks left by sparks and whispered to one another about the vibrations they had felt beneath their boots. Each recalled the strange stillness, a pause in the world that had arrived alongside the descending light. Some spoke in soft tones about the faint temps of ozone, a perfume of mystery that had clung to the air. Others remembered the metallic shimmer of the acorn-shaped object, how it caught the sun in fleeting patterns, as though it had its own language of light. A quiet conversation with those who had paused to watch. Among the first witnesses, Bill Bullabush carried a measured calm that seemed to anchor the town's collective memory. He described the object with precision, not in hurried excitement, but as one would recount the details of a dream that had left a lingering warmth upon the mind. The symbols, he said, tilting his head, they spiraled gently around the base. They were not letters or numbers we recognize, but there was rhythm in them, like a song written in metal. People leaned closer, tracing his words with imagination, as if seeing the object again through the careful cadence of his recollection. In those moments, the extraordinary became accessible, painted in soft brushstrokes of detail and wonder. John Murphy, the local radio reporter, gathered his notes, organizing his recordings into a tapestry of voices. Each account carried nuance, the hum that seemed to resonate beneath the feet, the curling blue smoke, the seamless bronze surface that reflected the faint sunlight and the stars of the emerging evening. Murphy noticed that witnesses did not speak in fear. They spoke with the gentle awe of people who had been offered a fleeting glimpse of something larger than themselves, something that moved with grace and subtle purpose. Even those who had been skeptical at first found themselves softened, as though the universe had whispered a secret that only the quietest hearts could hear. Stories began to circulate in homes and across the town. Small groups of neighbors gathered on porches, lingering over cups of coffee or tea, sharing what they had seen. It hovered before it landed, one man said softly, eyes tracing an invisible pattern in the air. It didn't crash. It chose where to rest. A child added, it glowed like it was alive, but gentle, like it wanted to be our friend. These accounts, though individual, wove together into a gentle chorus of memory, each note reinforcing the others, creating a fabric of shared experience that felt more like a soft dream than a mere observation. Even T-Town's animals seemed affected. Dogs, normally restless at dawn, padded quietly beside their owners. Horses paused at fences, ears pricked, nostrils flaring at scents too subtle for human notice. Birds circled overhead, hesitant and slow, as though sensing that the world had shifted just enough to demand respect. Nature itself, it seemed, had felt the object's presence and had softened in response, allowing humans and animals alike to absorb the quiet awe that lingered in the woods. By afternoon, informal interviews began to take shape. Families who had ventured into the fields recounted their experiences, comparing notes and marveling at the consistency of their memories. The hum, an elderly woman said, it was not loud, not frightening, just a gentle vibration that made everything feel alive. Another added, the blue smoke lingered like a question in the air, soft and curling, as if it wanted us to wonder. These stories were not hurried. They flowed like gentle streams, weaving together observations and impressions, leaving spaces for imagination to wander freely. Bill returned to the edge of the woods, careful not to disturb the flattened earth or the faint traces of blue smoke that still lingered like a memory. He knelt, tracing the impressions with gloved hands, noting the subtle depression in the soil where the acorn-shaped object had rested. He spoke to those who joined him in whispers, sharing what he had observed without insistence, allowing each person to interpret the details through their own lens of awe. It was a quiet ritual of remembrance, a way to honor the brief intersection of ordinary life with something extraordinary. John Murphy, meanwhile, began to sketch out a narrative for his radio broadcast. He didn't rush to offer conclusions or explanations. Instead, he framed the event as a story of wonder, a light that had descended from the sky, a gentle hum that had threaded through the town, and a visitor whose very presence had invited observation and reflection. The voices of the witnesses wove seamlessly into his narrative, each description treated like a brushstroke on a canvas, soft and deliberate, creating a picture that could live in the imagination of anyone who heard it. As evening fell again, Kecksburg felt a subtle quieting. The streets emptied gently, the frost settling once more over fields and sidewalks. Families gathered in their homes, sharing stories with soft voices, layering memory upon memory like blankets over a sleeping child. Children imagined the acorn-shaped object hovering among the trees, symbols glinting in the fading light, smoke curling slowly into the night. Adults traced the patterns in their minds, feeling the hum resonate gently beneath the surface of thought, carrying with it a sense of possibility, of quiet wonder, of something larger than their everyday lives. Even as the town slept, Kecksburg held its breath, cradling the stories and reflections that had grown out of the night's extraordinary event. The acorn-shaped object, though gone, remained present in memory, a gentle pulse in the mind's eye, a soft question suspended in the air, inviting each witness to ponder what they had seen, to listen carefully to the world, and to carry the quiet magic forward. And in that shared stillness, the town discovered something subtle yet profound, that the extraordinary does not always arrive with flash and alarm. Sometimes it descends quietly, like a visitor leaving traces not of fear, but of curiosity, awe, and a gentle invitation to wonder. The night deepened, stars appearing one by one, their distant light mirrored in the eyes of those who had glimpsed something beyond the ordinary. And though sleep embraced the town, the echoes of wonder, the hum of curiosity, and the gentle memory of the acorn-shaped visitor lingered softly, quietly, in every heartbeat, in every thought, in every dream that followed. And as the stars watched silently above, the whispers of Kecksburg's witnesses began to weave a tapestry of memories that would ripple across time. Chapter 5: Shadows of Inquiry. The days following the acorn-shaped visitor's departure settled over Kecksburg with a rhythm that was both familiar and gently altered. The town resumed its ordinary routines, soft clatter of dishes in kitchens, the muted conversations at general stores, the distant hum of vehicles along snow-dusted roads. Yet beneath this everyday calm, an undercurrent of curiosity wove through the streets and fields, as if the very air had retained the subtle vibration of what had fallen from the sky. It was the kind of quiet that invites reflection, a calm that encourages the mind to linger, tracing possibilities and imagining stories too delicate to speak aloud. Within hours of the event, the first official inquiries began to arrive. Men in plain suits, unmarked vehicles, and calm authority moved quietly through the town, introducing themselves to local leaders and those who had witnessed the object firsthand. There were no sirens, no urgent commands, only soft, deliberate questions, polite nods, and a careful observation that seemed to measure both the town and the memory of what had occurred. Witnesses spoke cautiously, aware that these inquiries carried weight beyond ordinary understanding. Even as the adults answered gently, children lingered nearby, listening with wide eyes, sensing the quiet seriousness and the soft tones of the strangers. Bill Buellbush, ever measured, became a point of contact. He walked slowly with one of the investigators, pointing out the areas where the object had rested and where faint traces of smoke and impressions in the ground remained. His hands moved deliberately over the earth, tracing the patterns with gloved fingers, as if the memory could be drawn from the soil itself. He described the bronze surface, the spiraling symbols, the faint hum that seemed to pulse in the air. The investigator nodded silently, recording every detail, and Beale felt the gentle weight of the moment his words would become part of a story larger than the town. A story that might ripple far beyond the frost-covered streets and skeletal trees of Kecksburg. News spread quietly, carried through phone calls, word of mouth, and soft conversations at the general store and the local diner. Reporters from nearby towns arrived, their presence understated but purposeful. John Murphy continued his work, interviewing neighbors, listening to their recollections, and weaving their voices into a tapestry of memory. He noticed patterns in the stories, the hum that had persisted in the woods, the precise shape of the acorn-like object, the curl of blue smoke, and the symbols etched in smooth bronze. Each detail, though repeated, gained a depth of resonance, as though it were part of a larger language spoken in silence and observation. The investigators themselves moved with deliberate care, gently examining the site, taking measurements, and recording the observations without haste. There was no rush, no clamor. The process resembled a delicate dance, where every movement was measured, every step thoughtful. They asked witnesses to describe what they had seen, encouraging careful recollection rather than hurried speculation. Children who had observed from a distance spoke softly, drawing pictures in the dirt with sticks, tracing the contours of the object, the direction of sparks, and the curl of smoke. Adults mirrored these gestures, leaning close, nodding in quiet agreement, sharing impressions without demanding precision. It was a process that honored memory, not forced it, and the town responded with a sense of reverence that made even the investigators pause in recognition. As the day wore on, theories began to emerge, whispered in the hallways of homes, over cups of coffee, and in quiet conversations along frost-covered streets. Some spoke of meteors, the natural fireballs that streak across the sky from time to time. "It could have been a meteor," a farmer said softly, tracing his finger along the edge of a scar in the earth where sparks had fallen. But it hovered. It didn't just fall. Others suggested man-made object satellites, spy equipment, remnants of experiments conducted far above the atmosphere. The acorn-shaped visitor, smooth and metallic, with precise spirals etched along its base, seemed to resist simple explanations, gently pushing the imagination toward possibilities that lay just beyond certainty. Even children offered their own quiet conjectures. "Maybe it's from a dream," one whispered, eyes reflecting sunlight in a way that made adults pause. "Maybe it wants us to tell stories about it." Their words, unburdened by the need for proof or logic, carried a truth that was felt rather than analyzed. The hum, the smoke, the shape. It was all part of a gentle invitation to wonder, and those who listened closely could hear the subtle rhythm of the extraordinary stitched into the fabric of the ordinary. By evening, the town began to notice patterns in the inquiries themselves. Investigators were methodical, moving from witness to witness, recording impressions and observations, but never revealing conclusions. There was a quiet withholding, a sense that the event was part of something larger, a story that extended beyond the edges of the town and the frost-dusted fields. Witnesses felt the weight of that quiet secrecy, a gentle tension that added depth to their memories, reminding them that they had been present at a moment that might never be fully explained, a moment suspended between the seen and the unknown. In homes and small gatherings, people compared recollections, discovering a consistency that was both surprising and comforting. The shape of the object, the patterns of its symbols, the soft hum and the curl of smoke, these details appeared again and again, forming a delicate lattice of shared memory. Children acted out the story in quiet play, tracing shapes in the air and mimicking the gentle vibrations they had felt, while adults discussed the subtle changes in the air, the calm rhythm of the investigators, and the unspoken understanding that something larger had passed through their world. John Murphy's recordings became a gentle archive of these reflections, capturing not only words, but pauses, inflections, and the small, almost imperceptible gestures that conveyed awe and curiosity. Listeners could hear a hand brushing against frost-laden leaves, the soft exhale of breath in cold air, the murmur of voices overlapping with the distant caw of a crow, or the gentle rustle of wind through skeletal branches. Each layer added texture, making the story alive not only in memory, but in sound, in rhythm, in the gentle cadence of everyday life touched by the extraordinary. The investigators, meanwhile, documented their work with meticulous care. They measured depressions in the ground, noted the lingering traces of smoke, photographed the acorn-shaped visitor in detail, and sketched the patterns of symbols. Their demeanor remained calm and deliberate, creating an atmosphere of respect and patience. Even as they took notes and recorded impressions, there was an understanding that the moment required gentle handling, that the extraordinary must be treated with care so that it might live in memory without distortion. As night approached, the town settled into its quiet rhythm once more. The streets emptied gently, and the frost gleamed softly in the fading light. Families gathered inside, sharing quiet reflections on the day's events. Children traced the shape of the object in the dust on tables or on the pages of notebooks, telling their own versions of what they had seen and felt. Adults lingered in conversation, aware that the morning had left them with subtle knowledge, that the universe could be gentle in its revelations, that mysteries might touch ordinary lives in quiet, unassuming ways, and that the hum of curiosity could be as profound as any explanation. In bedrooms across Kecksburg, children drifted into sleep with soft smiles, imagining the acorn-shaped object resting gently in the woods, symbols glinting under the moon, blue smoke curling softly into the sky. Parents, too, reflected in silence, their thoughts tracing the patterns of memory like gentle brushstrokes, savoring the resonance of the day's events, and feeling the quiet pulse of wonder that had threaded through the town. And so the town of Kecksburg settled beneath the night sky, stars appearing one by one, distant and cold yet intimately familiar. Though the acorn-shaped visitor had been moved beyond the town, its presence lingered, folded into the frost, the hum, and the minds of those who had witnessed it. Every gentle breeze, every subtle rustle in the trees seemed to carry a fragment of that extraordinary day, soft, enduring reminder that even in the quietest moments the universe had secrets waiting to be discovered by those who watched, listened, and wondered. And as Kecksburg's nights grew longer, the town began to carry its quiet secrets forward, each whisper and memory a thread in a tapestry that would stretch far beyond the fruit-covered streets. Chapter 6. The gentle weight of explanation days turned into weeks, and Kecksburg began to feel the soft weight of questions. The acorn-shaped visitor had been moved beyond the town's reach, but its presence lingered in the frost-lined fields, in the skeletal trees, and in the minds of those who had glimpsed it. A quiet tension settled over the town, like the pause between heartbeats, as residents wondered what had truly happened. The hum of curiosity remained, gentle but insistent, pressing softly against the ordinary rhythm of daily life. The first official statements arrived slowly, carried by local newspapers and radio broadcasts. They spoke in calm, measured tones, describing the event as a natural occurrence, a meteor, or a re-entering satellite. Nothing unusual occurred, the words read, printed in orderly columns. Yet, despite the neat phrasing, there was a subtle unease beneath the sentences. Witnesses remembered the deliberate hovering of the object, the curl of blue smoke, and the intricate symbols etched into its bronze surface. The words of scientists and officials seemed to float above the memory of what had been seen, a gentle brush of rationality over something vivid and persistent. Children, with their natural curiosity, noticed the discrepancy first. "But it didn't fall like a rock," Lillian Hayes said, tracing her fingers in the air as though drawing the gentle arc of the visitor's path. "It turned. It hovered. It wasn't like the meteors in the books." Her parents nodded silently, feeling the subtle truth of her observation. There was a quiet patience in the way children held their impressions, a willingness to sit with wonder without forcing it into tidy categories. Their observations reminded adults that some mysteries were meant to linger, to expand slowly in the imagination rather than be confined by neat explanations. Journalists arrived in small numbers, moving quietly through the town to gather their own accounts. John Murphy continued his work, capturing voices, gestures, and the soft rhythm of memory. He noticed the gentleness in the way witnesses described the object, how they spoke in soft cadences, pausing to allow each impression to settle before moving to the next. Their descriptions flowed like a slow river, each detail reflecting light and movement. And Murphy realized that these stories carried more than observation. They carried awe, curiosity, and a deep, subtle recognition of something extraordinary. Official investigators also returned intermittently, sometimes in plain clothes, sometimes in uniforms, always with calm deliberation. They asked questions gently, listened patiently, and recorded observations without intrusion. Their presence added a layer of quiet authority to the town's memories, but it also stirred subtle unease. Residents felt the soft tension of knowing that their words, gestures, and recollections were being preserved for purposes they could not fully see. Yet, in the careful respect of the investigators, there was also an acknowledgement that the extraordinary had touched ordinary lives, and that this touch deserved to be recorded thoughtfully and without haste. Conversations in homes, on porches, and along frost-dusted streets began to revolve around the gentle tension between personal experience and official explanation. Adults spoke softly, comparing the hum, the blue smoke, and the seamless surface of the object to the neat words printed in newspapers. "They call it a meteor," one man said, tracing the shape of the object with his hand in the air. "But it didn't behave like any meteor I've ever heard of." Another replied, "Maybe it's a satellite, or something man-made, but it still felt different, like it had its own rhythm." These reflections, spoken in soft tones, carried an unspoken understanding. The extraordinary does not always yield to simple answers. Children contributed their own quiet insights. They drew the object in notebooks, traced its arcs and patterns with pencils and crayons, and imagined it in motion, hovering, spinning gently, and letting the blue smoke curl like a whisper into the sky. Their drawings were not diadreams. They were stories, visual lullabies, that captured the hum, the light, and the gentle rhythm of the visitor. Parents often lingered beside these small works, marveling at the depth of perception and subtle understanding that emerged from the simplest observations. There was a wisdom in these innocent records, a gentle insistence that the world could be extraordinary even in its quietest moments. Meanwhile, in the wider world beyond Kecksburg, the event began to echo through newspapers, radio broadcasts, and informal channels of communication. Headlines presented measured explanations. Meteor sighting confirmed near Kecksburg. No evidence of extraordinary phenomenon found. Yet, beneath these printed words, the hum of curiosity persisted, carried by those who had seen, felt, and remembered. Letters to editors, calls to radio stations, and informal reports flowed slowly, like quiet streams feeding a larger river of speculation. Each account was imbued with personal resonance, carrying the subtle energy of first-hand experience that no tidy explanation could fully contain. The scientists and officials who analyzed the event approached it with careful methodology. Measurements of trajectory, analysis of seismic data, and meteorological reports were gathered and studied. Yet, for those who had observed the visitor, these analyses felt like gentle waves against a steadfast stone. The object's deliberate descent, the intricate spirals of its symbols, and the lingering hum seemed to resist reduction to formulas and charts. Witnesses understood that some aspects of experience exist beyond calculation, and that their memories carried truths of perception that were no less real for being even as skepticism circulated. There was a soft unity among those who had seen the visitor. Shared memory created bonds between families, neighbors, and friends, knitting the town together in a subtle, enduring way. Conversations began with observations and flowed into wonder, speculation, and gentle theorizing. No one felt compelled to resolve every question. The joy was in the shared contemplation, the soft reflection, and the quiet acknowledgement that the universe sometimes whispers instead of shouts, leaving hints and impressions for those patient enough to notice. The object's departure became a quiet narrative thread that stitched together days and nights. People described it with care, tracing the edges of memory like a delicate map. Bill Buellbush's recollections, shared repeatedly and gently, provided a foundation, a soft anchor for the town's collective consciousness. Children followed his example, adding layers of imagination and interpretation, while adults measured their words with care, aware that the extraordinary required a delicate touch. Even the investigators noted the subtle persistence of memory, the way impressions lingered in soft patterns, and the way wonder can be carried quietly from one person to another without disturbance or alarm. Night brought with it a renewed sense of contemplation. The stars hung low and cold, distant but intimately present, and the skeletal trees cast gentle shadows across frost-covered streets. Families settled into homes, speaking softly, imagining the hum of the object, the gentle curl of blue smoke, and the shimmering bronze surface glinting under fading light. Children fell asleep with stories of hovering lights, delicate symbols, and whispers from the sky, their dreams threading through the town's collective memory like soft, unbroken lines. For the adults, the quiet reflection was just as profound. They traced paths in the snow where sparks had fallen, remembered the vibration underfoot, and recalled the precise rhythm of the investigators' movements. Conversations meandered naturally, sometimes pausing in reverence, sometimes drifting into gentle speculation. The event had become a living memory, one that did not demand resolution but invited quiet exploration, imagination, and contemplation. It existed in the space between observation and understanding, a whisper in the wind and a hum beneath the frost, gently tugging at the mind's edges. The town, in its evening hush, came to understand that some questions are meant to linger. Official explanations offered calm closure, but they did not erase the texture of memory, the gentle pulse of wonder, or the subtle hum that persisted in quiet moments. Witnesses found comfort in each other's recollections, in the shared acknowledgement that something extraordinary had occurred, even if the full truth remained just out of reach. Their understanding was neither complete nor hurried. It was patient, gentle, and enduring like the soft folding of night over the frost-covered fields. And so, as Kecksburg slept beneath the same sky that had once cradled the visitor, the town carried forward its memories with care. Children dreamed of hovering lights and spiraling symbols. Adults whispered soft reflections to one another, acknowledging the gentle mystery that had brushed against their lives. The town's frost-lined streets, skeletal trees, and quiet homes held traces of the extraordinary, invisible yet profoundly present, like soft echoes in a lullaby that lingers long after the song has ended. The universe, it seemed, had spoken to Kecksburg, not with alarm or force, but with quiet reverence, leaving behind questions that were as gentle as they were enduring, and a memory that would hum softly in the hearts of all who had witnessed it. And as the nights lengthened, Kecksburg's questions began to ripple outward, carried softly in whispers, letters, and quiet reflections that hinted at mysteries still waiting to be understood. Chapter 7. The Whispers of Memory. The days following the official statements settled over Kecksburg with a rhythm that was familiar, yet softly altered. The town's ordinary life carried on the slow creak of doors, the muted chatter of neighbors, the hum of cars along frost-lined streets, but beneath it all ran an invisible current, subtle and persistent, like a quiet stream threading through the landscape. That stream was memory, stitched delicately with wonder, reflection, and the soft pulse of questions that refused to settle neatly. In homes across town, families revisited the night of the visitor. Children traced arcs in the air, imagining the acorn-shaped object hovering among the trees, its bronze surface glinting faintly, symbols spiraling in patterns that seemed to tell stories without words. Their parents listened, leaning over notebooks or maps of the town, carefully noting the frost-lined trails where sparks had fallen, the soft depressions in the earth, and the faint temps of ozone that had lingered in the air. Conversations unfolded gently, sometimes in silence, sometimes with a slow cadence of speculation, each word a delicate brushstroke on the canvas of memory. Witness interviews began to form a quiet archive. Local reporter John Murphy continued his work, capturing voices and gestures with patient attention. He moved slowly from home to home, listening as people recounted their experiences with care, ensuring that every subtle detail was preserved. It hovered, a farmer recalled, eyes soft with thought, not like any meteor eye bereaved of. It had a rhythm of its own. Another whispered, the symbols, they weren't letters, not as we know them. But they felt deliberate, meaningful, like a language of light. Murphy recorded every pause, every hand gesture, every soft inflection, understanding that memory is often more truth than mere fact. Children offered their own quiet interpretations, blending observation and imagination. Lillian Hayes sketched the object's curves, drawing spirals that seemed to dance off the page, and added tiny figures to indicate motion, as if the acorn-shaped visitor had a life of its own. It wasn't scary, she said with a gentle smile. It just wanted to be seen. Her words were simple, but they carried a depth that adults recognized instantly, the kind of clarity that comes from seeing something extraordinary without fear, and from trusting one's own senses above the chatter of explanation. As the town's memories deepened, so too did the gentle fascination of outsiders. Reporters from neighboring areas arrived quietly, notebooks and cameras in hand, careful to move unobtrusively through frost-crusted streets. They observed children tracing the shape of the object in dust, and Frost watched families compare recollections, and noted the subtle reverence with which adults spoke of the night's events. Nothing in Kecksburg resembled panic or alarm. Instead, the town seemed to shimmer with curiosity, a kind of patient wonder that had woven itself into the rhythm of daily life. Interviews revealed more than mere observations. Witnesses described the hum that had threaded through the woods. A vibration felt beneath the feet, subtle but persistent, as if the earth itself were humming in response. Adults spoke of the faint, acrid scent, blue smoke curling upward like slow-moving question marks in the air, and the way sunlight had caught on the object as a metallic surface reflecting not just light but a sense of quiet intelligence. Children recalled the gentle movements, the arcs traced by sparks, and the careful spirals etched along the base, all as though the visitor had paused to perform for those who watched with patient attention. The more people spoke, the more a pattern emerged. Though each recollection was individual, certain details repeated with surprising consistency. The shape, the symbols, the hum, the curling smoke, these persisted in memory, creating a gentle lattice of agreement that resisted simple dismissal. Even as skeptics in nearby towns questioned the accounts, the people of Kecksburg knew in their hearts that what they had seen had been real. It was a memory threaded with the quiet resonance of wonder, unfolding slowly and deliberately across frost-lined streets, empty fields, and skeletal trees. As interviews continued, subtle folklore began to grow. Stories were shared softly, around kitchen tables and along quiet sidewalks, with embellishments kept gentle and respectful. Children told of how the visitor might return, not with loud flashes or clamor, but with the same quiet grace, bringing curiosity instead of fear. Adults speculated on its origin, musing about satellites, distant stars, or perhaps something entirely beyond human understanding. These speculations were not frantic. They were gentle explorations, whispers of what if that lingered in the air like faint smoke from a fire long extinguished. Some residents, reflecting on the symbols etched along the base of the object, began to imagine meanings that went beyond language. Spirals and curves suggested stories, rhythms, and movement. "It's like it has its own way of speaking," one woman said softly, tracing an invisible spiral in the air with her finger. "A language we can't read yet, but one we can feel." Children echoed this sentiment, describing the symbols as musical notes or dance patterns, as if the visitor had carried a melody from the stars, gently imprinted into metal for those patient enough to notice. As weeks passed, visitors came from further away, drawn by whispered reports and curiosity. They walked the frost-lined streets, peered into the woods, and listened to Kecksburg residents recount their observations. Each newcomer added their own layer of reflection, their own soft questions, which blended seamlessly into the existing tapestry. There was no frenzy, no desperate search for a proof, only quiet curiosity, a slow unfolding of collective wonder. Even the investigators, who returned periodically in their plain clothes, seemed to acknowledge the subtle rhythm of this process, recording impressions without interference, careful to preserve the soft heartbeat of memory rather than disturb it. By evening, the town would settle into quiet contemplation. Families gathered by firesides, children tracing the object's arcs in notebooks, and adults sharing gentle observations from the day. The hum, the smoke, the spirals all were remembered with reverence, whispered aloud in low tones that allowed imagination to flourish. The rhythm of the town had changed subtly, carrying with it the awareness that something extraordinary had brushed against their lives, leaving a trail of wonder that could be felt even in silence. Local stories began to intertwine with the natural world. Farmers spoke of frost patterns resembling spirals, of birds lingering in unusual formations, of the way morning fog curled across the fields like pale smoke. Children imagined the visitor moving among the trees, following hidden paths, leaving tiny traces of presence behind. Even animals seemed to respond. Dogs pausing at fences, horses lifting heads and ears in quiet attentiveness, birds circling slowly overhead. Nature itself seemed to recognize the extraordinary, allowing the town to hold the memory tenderly, without rush or disruption. Through all of this, Kecksburg developed a gentle understanding. The extraordinary need not arrive with alarm or spectacle. Sometimes it comes softly, like a visitor who asks only to be noticed, who leaves behind questions instead of demands, and who invites reflection rather than fear. And as residents shared stories, traced arcs, and remembered hums and spirals, they wove a tapestry of memory and imagination that would endure long after frost melted, leaves fell, and seasons cycled through the quiet town. Even as time moved forward, the whispers of memory persisted. Children grieved, families changed, and new faces arrived in Kecksburg. Yet the gentle hum of curiosity remained, threading through streets, fields, and homes. The acorn-shaped visitor, though physically gone, had become a subtle part of the town's rhythm. A quiet pulse that reminded everyone of the beauty of slow wonder, of the mysteries that linger in the spaces between sight and understanding, and of the extraordinary that sometimes graces ordinary life without fanfare. In the soft hush of night, with stars winking gently overhead, the town held its breath in quiet reverence. Children fell asleep, imagining the visitor's return. Parents pondered the delicate balance between curiosity and explanation, and the town itself seemed to pause, attuned to a gentle presence that had passed through its fields and homes. The whispers of memory carried on in soft voices, in gentle reflections, and in the quiet rhythm of life, ensuring that the wonder of that night would echo across frost, fields, and stars for generations to come. And in those quiet echoes, Kecksburg learned a subtle truth, that some mysteries are meant to be savored slowly, to be traced with gentle thought, and to inspire curiosity that stretches softly across time like a lullaby that lingers long after the song is ended. And as the town slept beneath the same stars that had watched over the visitor, the seeds of stories, speculation, and quiet wonder began to grow into something larger, gently reaching beyond the frost-lined streets. Chapter 8. Voices between the lines in the soft mornings that followed the Kecksburg visitor. The town began to feel the gentle pull of outside eyes. Newspapers carried neatly printed columns. Radio broadcasts spoke in calm, measured tones, and occasional travelers wandered quietly through frost-lined streets, drawn by whispers that traveled far beyond the town. It was a subtle attention, unhurried, respectful in its own way, and yet it introduced a new layer of wonder and reflection. The world beyond Kecksburg seemed to lean in, seeking fragments of memory, traces of light, and the soft hum that lingered in the air. Children were the first to notice the differences, as they traced arcs in notebooks and drew spirals on frost-laced windows. They remarked on the voices that now seemed to float through the town, the gentle crackle of radios announcing explanations, the soft murmur of visitors asking questions, the hushed tones of reporters eager for details. "They don't hear it like we do," Lillian whispered, her small hands shaping the outline of the acorn-shaped visitor in the air. "They only see words and pictures. They don't feel the hum." Her parents listened, leaning close, realizing that perception often moves more delicately than mere words can capture. Reporters approached the event with a balance of curiosity and caution. John Murphy, who had spent hours collecting first-hand accounts, moved carefully between homes, capturing voices, gestures, and the subtle inflections that betrayed awe, hesitation, or wonder. Every pause, every soft intonation, every breath drawn. The child traced the arc of light across the night sky became part of his careful record. Understood instinctively that this was not simply an event to be reported, but a delicate story to be preserved in the rhythm of memory itself. Early media coverage was cautious, often veiled in polite skepticism. Headlines appeared in neat type, describing the sighting as a meteor or space debris, and experts offered calm, measured explanations that floated across print and radio waves. A natural phenomenon, one scientist suggested, a re-entry of man-made satellite material. Yet these neat statements often landed softly, like snowflakes, on a town that had felt the warmth of something alive, delicate, and inscrutable. Residents noted the discrepancy. The official words did not quite capture the hum beneath their feet, the curl of blue smoke, or the spiraling symbols etched into bronze. Children filled the spaces between explanation and observation with imagination, whispering stories as they played beneath skeletal trees. "Maybe it's a visitor from somewhere far away," one said, tracing a spiral in the dust on a windowsill. "It's not dangerous, it just wants us to see it." Adults smiled quietly, understanding that these stories carried their own truth. The imagination, Tay really said, was as vital to understanding the extraordinary as observation itself. It allowed memory to breathe, to stretch gently beyond the boundaries of measurement, and to linger in the quiet corners of frost-lined streets. Families gathered in homes, around crackling fires, to compare recollections. The gentle tension between what was seen and what was explained became a source of thoughtful reflection. Parents spoke softly about the hum, the precise arcs of the object, and the delicate patterns of symbols. Children echoed the shapes and sounds in gentle play, sketching spirals and arcs, imagining movements that could not be captured in words. Together, the town created a tapestry of observation and memory, one where the extraordinary rested calmly alongside the ordinary. Outside, observers continued to arrive, each drawn by fragments of stories carried in newspapers or whispered through neighbors' travels. They moved with soft curiosity, asking gentle questions, listening without judgment, and recording impressions with careful attention. Farmers described frost patterns resembling spirals. School children described arcs traced in the night sky, and neighbors spoke of the subtle hum, the faint curl of blue smoke, and the smooth, seamless bronze surface. All these fragments were collected and recorded, forming a gentle mosaic of memory that transcended the neat explanations offered by officials. The investigators themselves maintained an air of quiet deliberation. They returned periodically, sometimes in plain clothes, sometimes in uniform, always observing with gentle patience. Their questions were careful, encouraging reflection rather than hastening conclusions. Residents came to respect this quiet attention, noting the balance between authority and reverence. In the measured pace of inquiry, they sensed a subtle acknowledgement that the extraordinary required gentle handling and understanding. The some mysteries are best approached with patience, curiosity, and respect for memory. Media coverage, while polite, sometimes created friction. Some articles emphasized the meteor theory, citing astronomers and re-entry specialists. Others hinted at spy satellites, foreign tests, or classified experiments, balancing the need for intrigue with restraint. Letters to editors and soft radio call-ins carried local reflections, gentle corrections, and fragments of memory. Children's drawings were submitted to newspapers, not as proof, but as expressions of wonder. Adults contributed careful letters describing the hum, the shape, and the spiraling symbols. These voices intertwined with professional reports, creating a delicate dialogue between the seen and the explained, the remembered and the analyzed. Within the town, this gentle tension between curiosity and explanation nurtured an extraordinary patience. People learned to hold two truths side by side: the memory of what had been seen, delicate and precise, and the official words, carefully measured but never fully capturing the hum beneath their feet. Children learned to articulate observations softly, blending imagination with memory. Adults learned to listen, not to dismiss, and to honor the subtle patterns that made the extraordinary tangible. The rhythm of life itself seemed to deepen, paced by reflection, quiet conversation, and gentle attention to detail. Even the forest that cradled the landing site seemed to respond to the subtle fascination of the town. Frost-laden branches bent gently under early sunlight, casting intricate shadows that echoed the spirals of the visitors' markings. Leaves, long since fallen, arranged themselves in arcs along the forest floor, tracing silent paths for observers to follow. Birds moved slowly overhead, circling and settling in patterns that suggested awareness, as if the natural world had absorbed fragments of memory, carrying them gently through time. In classrooms, children whispered stories of the visitor during slow lessons, sketching the arcs and spirals that had lingered in memory. Teachers encouraged their curiosity, listening to the gentle hum of questions and reflections, and guiding the children to articulate their observations without fear. The visitor had become a soft presence in the rhythm of learning, a quiet inspiration that reminded everyone of the beauty of patient attention, careful observation, and the gentle thrill of a question unanswered. Across frost-covered streets, families continued to gather for quiet conversations. Discussions revolved not around fear or spectacle, but around careful wonder, reflection, and the subtle rhythm of shared memory. "It hovered," one adult would say, softly, "with a calm I can still feel in my chest." Children would nod, adding, "It left trails, like soft smoke," and the spirals shimmered, like they had a rhythm we could almost hear. Together, these voices stitched a delicate tapestry that connected memory, imagination, and gentle reflection. Even as outside attention waned, the town preserved the gentle pulse of curiosity. Every whisper of wind through skeletal trees, every faint rustle in the forest, seemed to carry a fragment of the extraordinary. Children's dreams traced arcs and spirals, adults reflected quietly on hums and symbols, and the town itself became a living archive of memory, holding both observation and speculation with calm reverence. And in the evenings, beneath stars that twinkled like distant lanterns, Kecksburg learned to inhabit a space between explanation and memory. The visitor, though removed, had left traces in frost, earth, and consciousness. Official statements could offer closure, yet they did not erase the soft hum, the curl of blue smoke, or the delicate spirals etched in bronze. Memory, imagination, and wonder continued to weave through the town, as enduring and gentle as the night sky itself. The extraordinary. Tay rarely said often arrives, not with alarm or urgency, but with the quiet invitation to observe, to wonder, and to imagine. In the balance between explanation and memory, Kecksburg discovered patience, reflection, and a subtle reverence for mysteries that remained gentle, yet profoundly enduring. The night would settle softly. Children would fall asleep with visions of spirals and arcs in their minds, and adults would close their doors, hearts quiet yet full of gentle anticipation. For in the space between reported explanations and personal experience, Kecksburg had learned a soft truth. The universe speaks slowly, hums gently, and leaves questions that ripple softly across time, like frost melting under the first light of dawn, and as the frost deepened and the day stretched longer, Kecksburg's quiet fascination began to blossom into a gentle rhythm of curiosity that would carry the story softly forward. Chapter 9. Threads of Folklore. Winter slowly gave way to early spring, softening frost into damp earth and allowing the world to breathe gently again. In Kecksburg, the memory of the visitor lingered like a quiet fragrance, subtle but persistent, threading through streets, fields, and homes. Conversations moved with deliberate slowness, carrying reflections of arcs traced in the sky, the curl of blue smoke, and the bronze surface etched with delicate spirals. Over time, these memories began to grow beyond mere recollection, weaving themselves into the fabric of the town's everyday life as something tenderly alive folklore in the gentlest sense. It began with the children. Their imagination, free from the constraints of skepticism, traced stories between frost-lined trees and skeletal branches. Lillian Hayes, inspired by the arcs she had seen, drew intricate spirals in notebooks and whispered narratives of a quiet traveler from distant skies. "It didn't come to scare us," she said softly. "It just wanted to share a story, and maybe teach us to notice." Other children echoed her sentiments, embellishing the visitor's movements with slow, graceful spins and hovering patterns, creating miniature plays that unfolded beneath the gaze of curious birds and the sway of early blooms. Parents observed this gentle creativity and began to see the extraordinary stitched into ordinary life. A mother watching her children play in the frost damp yard noticed how their arcs mimicked the visitor's flight, how they traced spirals in mud puddles, and how they whispered symbols that seemed almost like a language. Families shared quiet stories over evening fires, comparing what they had observed, what the children imagined, and what the adults themselves remembered. No one attempted to separate fact from speculation. Instead, the blending became part of the town's charm, a quiet acknowledgement that wonder does not always need validation to be meaningful. Even the adults began to embrace the subtle folklore. Farmers told of frost patterns resembling spirals and arcs, of birds gathering in unusual formations, and of lingering sounds in the woods that might echo the soft hum they had once felt. These observations, shared in low reverent tones over kitchen tables or on porch steps, became stories that carried not only memory but a gentle moral. That the extraordinary, though fleeting, could leave traces that linger quietly in the heart and the natural world. Local storytellers took these fragments of experience and wove them into narratives that flowed easily between observation and imagination. On quiet evenings, neighbors gathered to hear recollections told aloud, soft, deliberate, and slow. Each tale began with subtle description. The shimmer of bronze beneath fading sunlight, the curl of smoke spiraling skyward, the gentle thrum that vibrated beneath one's feet. Then it would expand into reflection, pondering not only what had occurred but what it meant, what it suggested about the wider universe, and how it had quietly touched each life it encountered. These gatherings were not performances, but shared meditations, a way to honor both memory and imagination with soft attention. Children's drawings and handwritten accounts began to circulate among families, like tender whispers made visible. Spirals traced on paper mirrored those etched into the acorn-shaped visitor. Arcs danced across pages with careful attention, and faint lines suggested motion, rhythm, and intention. Adults encouraged these small records, often adding annotations that linked memory to environment. The frost curled like this on Meteor Road, or the bird circled here in the early morning, as if following a path. In these gentle annotations, the town preserved both the extraordinary and the ordinary, keeping them in quiet, deliberate conversation with each other. Visitors continued to arrive, their curiosity slow and respectful, drawn by subtle stories rather than sensational headlines. They wandered along frost-lined streets, peeked into woods where blue smoke had once curled, and listened to recollections told with care and patience. They noticed how the town's residents spoke not to convince or persuade, but to share, to honor memory, and to invite gentle wonder. In response, visitors often left their own reflections, written notes, or quiet observations, contributing to a growing mosaic of imagination and memory that seemed to expand organically, held together by respect, curiosity, and attention. The town's folklore was delicate, threaded with personal reflection rather than exaggeration. Unlike tales that sought to astonish, these stories were patient and deliberate, honoring the subtleties of experience. Children recounted spirals and arcs, adults reflected on hums and vibrations, and everyone acknowledged that the extraordinary need not be loud to be profound. Each narrative, each memory, became a soft thread weaving the past and present together. A gentle reminder that some experiences resonate most when allowed to linger quietly in consciousness. Even nature seemed to participate in this unfolding folklore. Frost patterns, twisted branches, and the slow curl of morning mist seemed to echo the visitors' arcs. Birds lingered longer than usual, moving in quiet formations, and streams reflected spirals of sunlight that reminded observers of the blue smoke that had once curled skyward. Animals paused in unusual ways, as though the memory of that extraordinary night had left subtle traces in instinctive rhythms. Children, noticing these details, added them to their sketches and stories, blending memory, observation, and imagination seamlessly. The more these stories were shared, the more Kecksburg residents realized that wonder could be a form of connection. In gentle discussions around tables or along quiet sidewalks, families and neighbors spoke softly about arcs, spirals, hums, and trails of blue smoke. They listened to each other, asked questions with patience, and honored the subtle variations in perception. In doing so, the town cultivated a shared memory that was neither rigid nor fragile, but supple, enduring, and alive. It was a slow, luminous rhythm, woven from curiosity and reflection, and it became a defining characteristic of life in Kecksburg. As folklore grew, so did a sense of anticipation. Children imagined that the visitor might return, not with sudden spectacle, but with gentle grace, leaving behind arcs, spirals, and hums for those patient enough to notice. Adults wondered quietly whether the trails of smoke, the frost patterns, and the lingering vibrations were small invitations to pay attention, to observe the extraordinary quietly threaded through the ordinary. No one expected answers, yet everyone felt the soft pull of possibility, a gentle invitation that extended outward like a spiral itself. In homes, schools, and fields, these stories continued to grow in subtle ways. A teacher might encourage a child to trace an arc in sand while recounting the visitor-esque movement. A parent might describe the gentle hum as a lesson in attentiveness, linking sensory memory to reflection. Families gathered under stars to imagine paths traced through the sky, discussing arcs that might reach far beyond the town, symbols that hinted at stories untold, and the gentle curiosity that keeps questions alive without demanding resolution. Through all this, Kecksburg began to understand a quiet truth. Folklore does not require loudness, proof, or resolution. It thrives in patience, imagination, and attentive memory. The extraordinary visitor, though physically absent, had left traces that the town could feel, imagine, and pass on. These, threads memory, reflection, and gentle storytelling became a soft inheritance, carried forward through generations, patiently weaving ordinary life into something quietly luminous. And in the evening hush, when frost glimmered on windows and children's sketches lay scattered across tables, the town held its breath in reverence. Conversations paused, reflections lingered, and imagination moved in gentle arcs through rooms and streets. For Kecksburg had learned to honor both the seen and the imagined, blending memory, curiosity, and wonder into a tapestry that was enduring yet delicate, quiet yet profoundly alive. The visitors' hum, the curling blue smoke, and the bronze spirals had become more than memory. They were threads of folklore, carried softly in voices, in sketches, and in hearts, inviting all who encountered them to pause, to reflect, and to imagine with gentle attention. And so, in the tender embrace of shared stories, frost-lined streets, and quiet stars, Kecksburg continued to grow its own gentle mythology, one built not on alarm or spectacle, but on patient observation, delicate imagination, and the enduring joy of wondering at the extraordinary quietly threaded through the ordinary. And as whispers of spirals, hums, and arcs intertwined with frost and forest, the town's gentle curiosity began to ripple beyond memory, drawing attention that would quietly stir new reflections and subtle revelations. Chapter 10. The gentle arrival of inquiry. Spring unfolded softly over Kecksburg, painting the fields with tender shades of green and bathing the skeletal trees in new leaves that trembled in gentle breezes. The memory of the visitor had settled like a quiet mist over the town, threading its way into homes, schools, and conversations. Yet, as frost melted into earth and sunlight lengthened its touch across roads and rooftops, New figures began to arrive, not merely curious travelers or reporters, but individuals carrying notebooks, instruments, and the soft cadence of observation. Investigators, scientists, and experts came to witness, record, and gently question, moving carefully so as not to disturb the delicate rhythm that the town had cultivated. They arrived in slow, deliberate waves. Some came with telescopes, maps, and careful calculations, hoping to trace trajectories and timings with measured precision. Others arrived with notebooks and cameras, eager to capture the whispers of memory and the subtle arcs traced in the frost or dust. Their presence was neither invasive nor hurried. They moved as if the town itself were an instrument to be understood, a living archive of observation and recollection. Children watched from windows and doorways, quietly, curious, while adults greeted the visitors with a polite awareness that the extraordinary had already settled into gentle familiarity. Among the first to arrive were the meteorologists and astronomers, their eyes tracing the sky in careful, patient arcs. They noted the descriptions of the fireball, its sudden trajectory, and the curl of blue smoke that lingered like memory itself. Using calculations and simulations, they attempted to match the observed phenomena with known natural events, meteors, re-entering satellites, or fragments of cosmic debris. Their equations and measurements were precise, yet when they paused to listen to local recollections, the hum of memory that echoed beneath frost-lined trees, they began to realize that their instruments could measure light speed and angle, but they could not measure wonder. The military and government experts arrived quietly, their presence deliberate yet unobtrusive. Witnesses described the soft tread of boots across frost-crusted fields, the careful notes taken beside wooded ravines, and the muted hum of radios as plans were communicated in measured tones. No aggressive gestures, no alarms, only a quiet attention that mirrored the gentle curiosity already woven into the town. Adults spoke softly of their observations, offering careful reflections on arcs and the curling blue smoke, while children traced patterns in notebooks, sketching spirals and arcs with meticulous care. The investigators listened, sometimes nodding, sometimes recording silently, acknowledging that the extraordinary often spoke in subtleties, not declarations. As interviews and observations continued, hypotheses began to emerge. Meteor trajectories were recalculated, carefully compared against seismic readings and witness accounts. Satellite re-entry paths were scrutinized, orbiting fragments traced and retimed. Some suggested foreign objects, testing classified technology or conducting covert experiments. Others considered the possibility of advanced domestic craft, prototypes moving silently through the atmosphere in quiet arcs. Every theory was measured with a slow precision, balanced against recollections that had settled softly into the town's memory. Children contributed to the process in subtle, surprising ways. Their drawings and sketches, full of spirals, arcs, and gentle curves, provided visual cues that even the most meticulous instruments could not capture. Teachers encouraged the children to describe motion, color, and placement, allowing their observations to become part of the investigative record. It moved like it was listening. One child said softly, tracing a spiral in dust. It didn't go straight, but it didn't wander either. Eat, adapathorythm. Adults and investigators alike paused, considering the depth of such intuitive perception, realizing that sometimes observation is more than measurement, it is feeling. The town's adults engaged in gentle discussions with visiting experts, balancing memory and imagination with data and analysis. Farmers spoke of frost and field patterns, carefully noting where sparks had fallen or where hums had lingered. Families described the blue smoke, its curling motion, and the precise rhythm of the visitors' movement. Observers documented the symbols etched into bronze, pondering whether they were language, decoration, or something entirely unfamiliar. These conversations flowed slowly, allowing questions to linger without urgency, letting ideas settle as softly as the morning dew. As more experts arrived, a gentle rhythm of engagement formed. Meetings were held in town halls and libraries, where adults, children, and investigators shared their insights with patience and care. Observations were recorded, measurements compared, and theories discussed, yet always with the understanding that the extraordinary need not be forced into immediate comprehension. Every question invited reflection rather than pressure. Every answer carried humility, and every pause allowed the town to breathe in the quiet awareness of mystery. Reports emerged, gradually. Some suggested meteors, calculating the angles and velocities with meticulous precision. Others proposed satellite fragments, tracing orbits with gentle scrutiny. A few entertained the possibility of experimental craft, noting how arcs and rotations might correspond to deliberate engineering. In every case, the town listened, weighing each hypothesis softly against the memory of hums, blue smoke, and bronze spirals. No single explanation dominated. Instead, a mosaic of possibilities emerged, each considered carefully, and none dismissive of the delicate traces left behind. Even as analysis deepened, Kecksburg's own rhythm remained intact. Families continued evening conversations around fireplaces. Children traced arcs in notebooks and on frost-laced windows, and adults quietly considered the subtle evidence woven into their memories. The visitor, though absent, continued to move gently through consciousness, its presence measured not by loud spectacle but by the soft resonance of wonder that persisted across streets, fields, and classrooms. The more the town engaged with experts, the more the extraordinary seemed to settle into daily life. Frost patterns, bird formations, and lingering sounds in the woods became part of a shared archive of observation. Children's sketches mirrored arcs, calculated by astronomers. Adults' reflections enriched reports. In subtle ways, investigators came to recognize that Kecksburg itself was a living record, a quiet repository of human perception and attentive imagination. The extraordinary had been felt not only by direct observation, but by the town as own collective presence, and it continued to ripple gently through every conversation and reflection. Through this process, the town learned an important lesson in patience and subtlety. Curiosity could coexist with observation. Memory could coexist with measurement. And imagination could coexist with analysis. The extraordinary need not arrive with alarm or insistence. Sometimes, it leaves behind gentle traces, encouraging slow attention, careful thought, and reflection. Kecksburg, its streets soft with spring dew and sunlight, had become a place where wonder and inquiry could coexist gracefully. At night, children traced arcs and spirals across paper and windows, imagining the visitors' movements, while adults reflected on the day's observations and quiet revelations. The town seemed to breathe in gentle cycles, attentive to frost, fields, and forest, carrying memory and imagination as tender instruments of understanding. Even the investigators, calculators, and scientists noted the subtle ways in which Kecksburg had preserved not only memory but the very atmosphere in which wonder could thrive. In the slow cadence of observation, measurement, and reflection, Kecksburg learned that answers often arrive gradually, in whispers, and in ways that honor the subtleties of perception. The visitor's hum, the curling blue smoke, the bronze spirals. They were not simply events to be explained, but invitations to listen carefully, to wonder, and to allow memory and imagination to coexist with inquiry. And so, in the quiet embrace of spring, the town held both possibility and reflection close, savoring the gentle rhythms of observation and the tender unfolding of theories. Curiosity, patience, and wonder moved softly through the streets, classrooms, and fields, blending memory, imagination, and gentle investigation into a mosaic that was as enduring as it was delicate. The extraordinary. Tay rarely said, speaks slowly, moves quietly, and leaves traces that ripple through memory like soft echoes in frost and sunlight. Kecksburg had learned to attend with gentle care, honoring both the seen and the imagined, and in doing so, had discovered a rhythm of reflection that would carry its stories, whispers, and wonder far into the quiet future. And as the sun set across dukest fields and whispered shadows, the town felt a subtle shift. The stories of arcs hummed, and spirals were beginning to entwine with questions that reached beyond memory, inviting reflection on truths, yet softly hidden. Chapter 11, Whispers of Hidden Truths. Spring had settled into the hills around Kecksburg, softening the edges of frost-dappled fields and allowing streams to glimmer with the clarity of sunlight filtered through new leaves. The town itself moved in a gentle rhythm, as if time had slowed to match the memory of the extraordinary event that had touched so many hearts. Yet, beneath the calm surface, a quiet tension lingered, like a shadow tracing the edges of understanding, soft, almost imperceptible, but persistent. It was the subtle awareness that some truths might remain hidden, tucked gently away in official archives, behind locked doors, and within the careful words of those sworn to secrecy. Investigators continued to visit, their steps quiet along frost-lined roads and through dappled forests. They came with notebooks, instruments, and questions that moved at a careful pace, blending measurement with reflection. Yet, as thorough as their calculations and observations were, there remained gap spaces where memory, perception, and documentation did not align. Official reports sometimes contradicted recollections, and letters from distant agencies spoke in careful abstractions. Avoiding concrete answers while hinting at procedures long since completed, residents began to notice a gentle dissonance between what had been observed and what was explained, a reminder that reality often flows quietly beneath the surface, shaped by human intentions and institutional caution. Children, meanwhile, continued to imagine the visitor in quiet play. They traced spirals in mud, sketched arcs on frost-covered windows, and whispered stories to one another in low, deliberate tones. "It knows we're looking," one child would say, eyes wide with calm curiosity. "It left the spirals so we could see them." Even if the grown-ups can't understand, adults watched these exchanges with a mixture of admiration and reflection, realizing that the extraordinary often speaks in patterns, symbols, and rhythms that surpass ordinary language. In the delicate patience of observation, children had become the quiet guardians of memory, their imaginations preserving nuances that might otherwise fade into abstraction. Meanwhile, the gentle hum of investigation continued alongside subtle inquiries into lost or obscured records. Residents began hearing whispers of files that had gone missing, documents that were never returned, and fragments of information that seemed to vanish as soon as they were discovered. Letters obtained through formal requests revealed pages marked confidential, sealed with stamps that implied official oversight and discretion. Yet even in their absence, these gaps became part of the town's folklore, a silent acknowledgement that curiosity often encounters boundaries not imposed by nature, but by human choice. The presence of official secrecy did not unsettle the town, nor did it diminish curiosity. Instead, it infused conversations with a gentle tension, encouraging careful reflection rather than alarm. Families discussed the possibilities around dinner tables. Teachers guided children in gentle contemplation of evidence, and neighbors walked slowly through fields recalling the arcs, smoke, and bronze spirals. Every unanswered question became a soft invitation to observe more closely, to listen more carefully, and to cherish the delicate beauty of the unknown. Some of the town's adults began compiling their own records, creating journals, sketchbooks, and audio recordings of recollections. They documented frost patterns resembling arcs, subtle blue smoke trails in the woods, and faint vibrations felt beneath feet during the initial event. Interviews were recorded with children who had witnessed the visitor, noting their descriptions of movement, color, and symbols. Families shared these documents with visiting investigators, who sometimes nodded appreciatively, recognizing that the town's own archive was as valuable as formal instruments and official observations. The mystery deepened gently as fragments of history were discovered. Newspapers from distant cities occasionally reported on meteors, satellites, or unusual objects, sometimes aligning with the timing of the visitor's appearance, sometimes diverging in subtle ways. Residents compared accounts, noting inconsistencies, and weaving them into their shared narrative with careful attention. Each detail, whether precise or ambiguous, became a thread in a larger tapestry, a mosaic of observation, imagination, and memory that stretched softly across years, carrying questions that remained unanswered but never unsettling. Children's sketches, in particular, provided a delicate bridge between perception and reflection. Spirals traced on paper often mirrored the symbols etched into the bronze surface. Arcs drawn in the dirt echoed the movements observed in the night sky. In classrooms, teachers encouraged children to describe these shapes, their emotions, and the sensations they remembered, turning imagination into gentle documentation. Adults recorded these stories in journals, not to validate or debunk, but to preserve a quiet understanding that memory and imagination could coexist, complementing formal investigation with the tender accuracy of lived experience. Occasionally, experts shared soft hints of discoveries. A researcher might note an alignment between a reported trajectory and a known satellite path, or a subtle vibration matching seismic readings from a distant station. Every insight was measured carefully, presented with humility, acknowledging the limits of knowledge and the beauty of the unknown. The town listened with calm attentiveness, understanding that discovery often unfolds slowly, in whispers rather than proclamations. Even the natural world seemed to participate in these subtle revelations. Frost patterns traced arcs along fields, dew reflected morning light in spirals reminiscent of the bronze markings, and birds moved in gentle, deliberate formations above the trees. Residents, attuned to these signs, often paused in reflective observation, sensing that memory and nature were intertwined, carrying echoes of the extraordinary through familiar landscapes. Every observation became a quiet meditation, every pattern a reminder that wonder can reside in subtle, persistent rhythms. Local storytellers wove these fragments into narratives that moved like slow rivers through the town. They did not rush toward resolution or clarity, but instead lingered in the soft spaces between what was known and what was imagined. Each retelling honored memory, perception, and the gentle tension of unanswered questions. Children listened with wide eyes, adults reflected silently, and visitors often departed, carrying the impression that Kecksburg was a place where curiosity and patience were cultivated with care, where the extraordinary had been observed, remembered, and celebrated without alarm or spectacle. The gentle presence of secrecy, rather than instilling fear, became a quiet lesson in patience. The knowledge that some truths were withheld, combined with the fragments that could be observed, created a rhythm of inquiry that encouraged careful listening and reflective thought. Residents learned that mysteries need not be solved all at once, and that sometimes the most profound revelations arrive in whispers, in patterns, and in the slow accumulation of attention over time. Evenings in Kecksburg took on a reflective glow. Families gathered by fires, children traced arcs in notebooks or on fogged windows, an adult spoke softly of hums, spirals, and the gentle impressions left by the visitor. The town had discovered a rhythm of living that balanced curiosity with reflection, memory with imagination, and observation with gentle acknowledgement of the unknown. In this recitam, they found a quiet, enduring joy, the ability to hold mystery tenderly, to wonder patiently, and to honor the subtle beauty of what had been seen. And as night fell, stars scattered across the sky like tiny sparks of quiet possibility. The town paused to reflect. Every shadow in the woods, every frost-lined branch, every curling wisp of morning mist seemed infused with memory, carrying the gentle hum of the extraordinary through time and space. Kecksburg understood that some questions are not meant to be answered immediately. They are invitations to listen, observe, and imagine, to allow curiosity to flow softly alongside life itself. The visitor, though absent, had left more than arcs and spirals, blue smoke, and bronze surfaces. It had left a rhythm of reflection, a melody of curiosity, and the enduring sense that the extraordinary resides not only in spectacular events, but in the quiet, persistent observation of the world around us. Kecksburg had learned to attend with patience and reverence, cultivating a gentle awareness that would ripple softly through memory, conversation, and imagination for generations to come. And in the hush of night, with windows reflecting stars and children's sketches scattered across tables, the town embraced the subtle thrill of questions without answers, the gentle pull of memory intertwined with imagination, and the serene wonder of mysteries that move slowly, deliberately, and softly through the heart of life. And as the stars shimmered over frost-kissed fields and quiet forests, the town felt the subtle heartbeat of history, memory, and curiosity, preparing to gently uncover truths that would ripple softly through time. Chapter 12. Echoes beyond the trees. Summer had arrived gently over Kecksburg, painting the fields in warm golds and soft greens, and stretching long afternoons across quiet streets. The town had grown accustomed to the rhythms of life intertwined with memory, imagination, and the subtle presence of the extraordinary. But even as the sun lingered lazily above rooftops and treetops, a quiet awareness persisted. The incident of that December night was more than a memoriette. Had begun to ripple outward, softly shaping ideas, curiosity, and reflections far beyond the town itself. Experts and visitors continued to arrive, carrying notebooks, cameras, and instruments. Yet increasingly, they came not to uncover secrets through force or demand, but to listen, to trace patterns, ask gentle questions, and record reflections offered with patient care. The town's children, grown slightly taller with each passing season, still trace spirals in sand, dust, and frost, translating memory into gestures and sketches that seemed almost musical in their repetition. Adults guided their observations with patience, helping them see that curiosity, when nurtured gently, becomes a soft, enduring light. It was during these long summer afternoons that the broader implications of the event began to appear more clearly. Newspapers, podcasts, and documentaries revisited the visitor's appearance, not to sensationalize, but to explore its impact on science, society, and imagination. While official explanations still lean toward meteors, satellite fragments, or experimental craft, the persistent mystery drew subtle attention to questions that could not be answered by instruments alone. What does it mean when humans witness something extraordinary? How does memory shape perception? And what lessons are revealed when curiosity is allowed to linger without urgency? Residents of Kecksburg began to see the event as a bridge between observation and reflection. Families continued to share stories around fires and tables, while children mapped spirals across paper and windows, linking arcs in the sky to rhythms observed on the earth. Teachers wove the visitor's gentle presence into lessons about niche light and pattern, encouraging students to notice small details in the world around them. The curl of a leaf, the shimmer of sunlight across a puddle, the soft vibrations felt beneath one's feet. These exercises nurtured attention and calm reflection, allowing wonder to flourish quietly within the ordinary. Some of the town's elders began recording their own reflections, creating journals that intertwined memory with imagination, observation with reflection. They described the precise moments when the visitor had appeared, the curl of smoke rising from the wooded ravine, and the bronze surface etched with spirals that seemed to speak without words. They recounted the subtle vibrations beneath their feet, the faint hum that accompanied the visitor's movements, and the lingering sense that something both delicate and profound had passed through the town. These journals became quiet repositories of memory, meant not for proof or confirmation, but as invitations to observe, reflect, and imagine. Investigators continued their work alongside these gentle records. They revisited earlier calculations, tracing trajectories, and analyzing fragments of evidence with soft attention. Some reports suggested satellite debris, others experimental technology, and a few entertained the notion of phenomena that did not fit neatly into existing categories. In every case, Kecksburg's inhabitants listened with calm curiosity, aware that the extraordinary often defies strict explanation, and that reflection can be just as valuable as conclusion. The subtle tension between official secrecy and personal memory persisted, but it no longer produced anxiety. Instead, it became part of the town's quiet meditation on curiosity, knowledge, and trust. Lost files, classified reports, and unexplained gaps were not feared. They were acknowledged as reminders that some truths unfold slowly, and that patience can be a form of wisdom. Conversations along shaded sidewalks or across kitchen tables often circled gently around questions without answers, allowing residents to dwell in wonder without the pressure of certainty. As the season deepened, small festivals and gatherings arose, celebrating both memory and imagination. Children performed quiet reenactments of the visitor's arcs, tracing movements in slow, deliberate steps across grass and sand. Families shared drawings, sketches, and observations with neighbors, and visiting researchers noted with admiration how the town's collective memory had preserved subtleties that might have been lost elsewhere. These gatherings were not loud or celebratory in the usual sense. They were calm meditations, honoring patterns, symbols, and hums with quiet attention and soft smiles. Even nature seemed attuned to the lingering presence of the extraordinary. Birds paused to hover in arcs above fields. Sunlight shimmered across dewdrops in delicate spirals, and soft breezes carried patterns through grass and leaves. Residents observed these rhythms with gentle attention, recognizing echoes of memory in the living world around them. Children's sketches mirrored arcs traced in frost, dust, and sunlight, bridging imagination and observation in ways that honored both the visitor's presence and the quiet patience of human perception. Discussions of science, technology, and the unknown flowed alongside these reflections. Some visitors spoke of re-entry vehicles, satellite debris, or meteor, but the town had learned to hold these technical ideas gently, integrating them into a larger narrative of observation, curiosity, and reflection. Adults encourage children to ask questions, not with urgency, but with careful listening, emphasizing that understanding is a process as much as a conclusion. Memory, imagination, and inquiry coexisted in a soft rhythm, allowing the extraordinary to remain both wondrous and approachable. Amid this slow unfolding, subtle insights began to appear. Residents realized that the visitor had left behind not only arcs and spirals, hums and smoke, but a quiet template for attentive living. Observing carefully, reflecting slowly, and imagining freely became a form of participation in the extraordinary itself. Each sketch, journal entry, or whispered story contributed to a growing mosaic of gentle understanding, a recognition that wonder can be cultivated, preserved, and shared without needing sudden revelation or dramatic proof. Some families began to see connections between the visitor's movements and patterns in everyday life. Frost traced arcs across windows, clouds formed gentle spirals across the sky, and streams reflected sunlight in shapes that echoed memory. These patterns became a source of reflection, a gentle reminder that the extraordinary can manifest subtly, inviting careful observation and quiet attention. Children, guided by elders, learned to see the world not as a sequence of predictable events, but as a tapestry of rhythms, echoes, and possibilities that quietly unfold beneath notice. Even as official investigations continued, the town's gentle rhythm of inquiry flourished. Adults recorded reflections, children traced arcs and spirals, and visitors quietly observed the interplay between memory, imagination, and gentle inquiry. Each day brought subtle revelations, soft hints of patterns, and moments of shared reflection that reinforced the idea that the extraordinary is often more enduring when approached with patience and calm attention. As twilight settled over fields, rooftops, and frost-lined streets, Kecksburg embraced the quiet beauty of accumulated memory. Families lingered on porches, children traced arcs with fingertips in soft sand, and adults reflected on the hum, the bronze spirals, and the curl of blue smoke that had once touched the town so gently. The extraordinary had left traces not only in physical forms, but in attention, imagination, and the enduring patience of those who had witnessed it. And so the town moved gently through summer, carrying lessons of wonder, reflection, and quiet inquiry. Memory intertwined with imagination. Observation danced alongside theory, and the extraordinary continued to ripple softly through the lives of residents, visitors, and investigators alike. Kecksburg had discovered a rhythm of understanding that did not demand certainty, that honored curiosity without alarm, and that allowed mysteries to be held delicately, like a gentle breath passing through the trees, fields, and skies. The visitor's hum, its arcs, spirals, and soft presence had become a part of life. Self not a secret, to be forced into clarity, but a quiet melody of reflection and wonder that guided the town's attention, imagination, and gentle dialogue. In this way, Kecksburg became a place where the extraordinary was neither feared nor sensationalized, but cherished, preserved, and passed on as a tender invitation to notice, to wonder, and to reflect patiently on the vast mysteries that surround us all. And as the sun dipped low, casting long, gentle shadows across the fields and forests, the town felt a calm anticipation, sensing that even subtler truths were ready to reveal themselves to those who watched and listened with quiet attention. Chapter 13. The Gentle Rhythm of Memory. Autumn arrived softly in Kecksburg, brushing the fields and forests with muted golds, reds, and browns, and letting sunlight linger longer in the cool, clear air. The town itself seemed to exhale with the season, moving in gentle rhythms that reflected both memory and the quiet passage of time. Years had passed since that extraordinary December night, yet the echo of the visitor, its bronze spirals, curling smoke, and gentle hum, remained alive in hearts and minds. It had become a thread woven subtly through daily life, threading past and present into a tapestry of quiet wonder. Residents moved through the streets with a calm attentiveness. Children, no longer quite as small, still traced arcs and spirals in notebooks, sand, and dust, sometimes pausing to look skyward, imagining the curves of motion, the soft patterns in the night sky, the gentle rhythm of an unseen presence. Adults who had once hurried to the woods or listened closely for distant hums now carried memory as a soft companion, reflecting on details with warmth, guiding younger generations and honoring subtle truths that might not be written in any official record. Visitors continued to arrive, drawn not by sensational headlines, but by a quiet invitation. They came with notebooks, cameras, and instruments. Yet the experience of Kecksburg unfolded differently from any controlled investigation. Here, they were welcomed not only to observe, but to participate in a slow, gentle rhythm of reflection. Families shared stories around fireplaces. Children demonstrated patterns traced in sketches, and elders described the subtle traces of arcs and smoke that lingered in memory like faint music. It was a rhythm that required patience, quiet attention, and the willingness to let wonder unfold slowly. The town had grown accustomed to this delicate balance between curiosity and calm reflection. The extraordinaire was no longer only an event to be explained or measured. It was a gentle invitation to observe, to consider, and to imagine. Patterns in frost, wind, and sunlight became a quiet meditation on the visitors' movements, and residents discovered that even the smallest gestures, like the curl of smoke rising through a ravine, the shimmer of bronze etched with spirals, or the hum that lingered in memory, could inspire reflection and connection. Children continued to play quietly in fields and forests, moving in arcs that mirrored the gentle spirals of the visitors' flight. They whispered stories to one another, sketching patterns that echoed the shapes etched in bronze, tracing invisible lines through trees and across meadows. Adults observed with calm smiles, noting the ways in which imagination had become a living record, capturing subtleties that instruments and official reports might never measure. In this, the extraordinary became part of the town's heartbeat, soft, persistent, and entirely alive in memory. The season's slow shift encouraged reflection on deeper lessons. Some visitors and residents began to wonder about the boundaries between knowledge and mystery. What does it mean to witness something that cannot be fully explained? How does one honor memory when facts are elusive, and evidence may be incomplete or obscure? In gentle conversations along quiet streets, families and investigators alike acknowledged that understanding need not arrive all at once. Some truths are revealed in fragments, in patterns, and in the careful attention we bring to the world around us. Journals compiled over the years had become treasured artifacts, pages filled with sketches of spirals, arcs, and smoke trails. Notes about hums and vibrations, and personal reflections formed a mosaic of memory that was as much emotional as it was factual. Children's sketches, once simple and spontaneous, had become careful records of perception. Elders' reflections added context and insight, blending observation with imagination. Together, these fragments told a story that was more than data or proof. It was a living testament to patience, wonder, and gentle attention. Investigators who had returned year after year noted this unique quality in Kecksburg. While elsewhere, questions might be forced, conclusions demanded, and mysteries rushed toward resolution, here the extraordinary was allowed to unfold softly. Residents and visitors had cultivated a rhythm of inquiry that honored subtlety, recognizing that patience and reflection could illuminate truths in ways that urgency never could. The visitor had left behind more than traces. It had left a model of perception, a quiet pedagogy in the art of attentive observation. Even as the town reflected on the past, whispers of the future emerged in quiet curiosity. Children asked soft questions about what might exist beyond memory, beyond Earth, and beyond the familiar patterns of the sky. Adults encouraged these inquiries with gentle explanations, speculation, and thought experiments, reminding them that the unknown is not always to be feared, but can be cherished as a source of inspiration. Conversations flowed like soft streams, linking imagination to reflection, memory to possibility, and the extraordinary to the gentle rhythm of daily life. Nature itself seemed to participate in this quiet rhythm. Leaves spiraled down from trees like echoes of bronze cymbals. Sunlight shimmered across streams and dew-kissed grass, and subtle breezes carried traces of patterns through the fields. The town observed patiently, noting how the world seemed to mirror memory, imagination, and reflection in the smallest gestures, a reminder that the extraordinary often speaks softly, inviting attention rather than demanding it. As days shortened and autumn deepened, the gentle hum of history and memory continued to ripple through Kecksburg. Local festivals, storytelling circles, and reflective walks reinforced the town's quiet dialogue with wonder. Children acted out arcs and spirals in slow, deliberate play. Adults recorded soft recollections in journals. Visitors marveled not only at the incident itself, but at the enduring rhythm of reflection that defined the town. In these simple, intentional acts, the extraordinary remained alive, moving with the quiet heartbeat of observation, curiosity, and imagination. One evening, as twilight stretched long and amber across the fields, a group of children gathered along a small stream. They traced arcs in sand, whispered stories of hums and spirals, and watched the soft ripple of water reflecting the fading light. An elder approached, observing with quiet admiration. "Remember," she said softly, "wonder doesn't always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it moves like this, slow, subtle, and entirely yours to discover." The children nodded, eyes wide, sensing that every trace of memory, every echo of the extraordinary, was part of a gentle invitation to notice and reflect. In homes across the town, the same pattern unfolded. Families lingered over dinner conversations, recalling faint vibrations, blue smoke, and bronze spirals. Journals and sketches were placed on shelves, each page a gentle reminder that memory and imagination could coexist with observation and inquiry. Children drew quietly in corners, adults reflected beside fireplaces, and the town seemed to breathe with a rhythm of patience, wonder, and attentive curiosity. Over time, Kecksburg realized that the visitors' impact extended far beyond the event itself. The extraordinary had nurtured a community of careful observers, reflective thinkers, and imaginative storytellers. Patterns in frost, arcs in the sky, and spirals in sketches became part of a collective consciousness, a gentle reminder that the unknown can be embraced without fear. Curiosity had been cultivated as a daily practice, and memory had been preserved with care, ensuring that the extraordinary remained alive in the heart of the town. As night settled over the fields, forests, and rooftops, stars shimmered like scattered whispers across the sky. Children slept peacefully, their imaginations filled with arcs, spirals, and gentle hums. Adults rested carrying reflections of subtle traces and enduring wonder. Kecksburg itself seemed to hold its breath softly, cradling memory, imagination, and curiosity in the quiet rhythm of life. The extraordinary, once a fleeting visitor, had become a permanent presence not in grand spectacle, but in the tender, persistent echoes that shaped thought, observation, and reflection. And so, Kecksburg remained a town where wonder is preserved. Curiosity flows gently alongside daily life, and mysteries are held with patience, reverence, and calm attention. The visitors' hum, its arcs and spirals, and the subtle curling of blue smoke continued to inspire, reminding all who observed that the extraordinary is not always loud or immediate. Sometimes it moves softly, settles quietly into memory, and becomes a lifelong rhythm of reflection, imagination, and gentle understanding. In the hush of night, under a sky scattered with stars, the town breathed with a quiet serenity. Every frost-lined branch, every glimmer of sunlight, and every whisper of memory carried the tender lesson of the extraordinary. That wonder can be gentle, mysteries can be patient, and truth, in its softest form, can be held delicately, treasured, and shared for generations to come. And as the wind passed slowly through the trees, the town slept with a soft certainty that the extraordinary, though fleeting in appearance, had become eternal in memory, imagination, and the gentle rhythm of their lives. And in the quiet glow of night, with hearts attuned to memory, wonder, and reflection, Kecksburg rested, carrying the gentle rhythm of the extraordinary into every tomorrow. And so, the story drifts to a gentle pause, leaving the echoes of Kecksburg humming softly in the heart. The bronze spirals, the faint curl of blue smoke, and the delicate arcs across the sky linger not as questions to be urgently solved, but as tender invitations to observe, imagine, and reflect. Memory and wonder have entwined themselves with the town, carrying the extraordinary into everyday moments. The shimmer of sunlight on frost, the whisper of wind through the trees, the quiet patterns traced in sand or snow. What remains is not a singular truth, but a rhythm, a soft pulse of curiosity that moves slowly, deliberately, and patiently through time. The visitor's presence has become more than an event. It has become a melody woven into the lives of all who witnessed, imagined, and remembered. In Kecksburg, mystery is no longer feared. It is cherished, a gentle teacher that reminds us to listen, to notice, and to hold the unknown with reverence. Perhaps the greatest lesson is this: some wonders are never meant to be fully explained. Their beauty lies in the quiet spaces between observation and imagination, in the spaces where memory lingers, and in the soft, persistent pool of curiosity. And in those spaces, the extraordinary lives forever in, the gentle rhythm of thought, the whisper of imagination, and the calm reflection that shapes the soul. So, as your eyes grow heavy and the night carries you deeper into dreams, let the quiet hum of Kecksburg's memory soothe you. Let the arcs and spirals, the soft glow of mystery, and the gentle heartbeat of wonder guide you into a serene, reflective sleep. Remember, some stories are not concluded, they live on, softly, beautifully, in the mind and heart of all who listen. Good night, and may the gentle rhythm of the extraordinary'll follow you wherever your dreams may wander.